Good evening to Ms. Debarati Sen, and good evening to all the viewers of the BW Dialogue on Leadership. This is Dr. Annurag Batra from BW Business World. I join you today with a very special guest who is joining to us from Minnesota. She's relocated to Minnesota a couple of months back because she now heads the global business within the company she's part of. So let me welcome Ms. Debarati Sen. She's now a senior vice president, and she's the head of the global adhesives business for 3M. Prior to that, till a couple of months back, she was the MD and CEO of the 3M business in India, and she's been with 3M for many, many years. And she's been in B2B businesses for a long time. So we welcome Ms. Debarati Sen to the BW Dialogue on Leadership. She's joining at a time which is 6:30 a.m. From where she is. So good morning to you, Ms. Sen. Thank you for tuning in. And our viewers, and we welcome you to this discussion. Tell us, how do you feel being in Minnesota? I know you were getting onto a plane in March to come to India because your mother is in Bangalore, and for a long time you've been operating out of Bangalore, but for the last 2 months you've been in Minnesota, working out of home and doing the best you can. Tell us, how does it feel not to be able to get onto a plane and do what you want to and get back to a city that you wanted to? Tell us, how does it feel?
Yeah, the most important part was I missed a wonderful wedding in Rajasthan. And, as we all know, big fat Indian weddings, oh my gosh, I really missed all the food and the energy that I was going to be getting from that event. For a lot of us who have been so used to hopping onto a plane on a Monday morning, sometimes coming back, in a week or 2 weeks, it's really difficult to be on your kitchen table, which is where I am right now. I like being in bigger open spaces, which happens to be my kitchen. But I think it's all about building new muscles. So practicing the muscles that we have had. And I've, essentially really been energized by how quickly, not just me, but my peers, my team members, your listeners, how quickly people have embraced this new reality. We really don't have time to sit and say, oh my gosh, this is so different. And we've been through a lot of changes in our past. I forgot to mention this to you, but I don't know if you knew, but I grew up in Bhopal, and my father was in Union Carbide. So one fine morning on December 2nd in 1984, we woke up to find, more than 10,000 people gone from the city. Schools closed. Some of my teachers were impacted. As a senior in high school, I was in 11th grade, the last year of high school. We went and volunteered in the General Post Office sorting mail. So there are changes that come our way, sometimes cataclysmic and sometimes a little more gentle. This happens to be a black swan cataclysmic event, but I'm really looking to embrace the new normal. I absolutely, for sure, would love to go and visit our global centers, our global employees, and our global customers. So that's a little difficult. But we know there'll be a point in time when we'll be allowed on planes again, and I'd be able to go and meet my customers again. The part that's been really energizing for me, Dr. Batra, has been the fact how willing our customers, our channel partners, our employees have been to let them into their houses, into their homes. We're on video, we're seeing people, we're seeing dogs running behind, we're seeing children behind them. This intimacy that's developed during this time is something to be cherished.
Beautiful. So you're clearly very optimistic and adaptive and embracing the change, if I may say, and you share the viewpoint that everyone, whether it's employees, whether it's vendors, partners, family members, young children, everybody has embraced this change and at least for the time being accepted the new normal and trying to do well. So that's a very optimistic, and though you and me have conversations, the first time you told me that you saw what happened at Union Carbide and you lived through it, so to say.
Yeah.
Now, you're a leader. You are the MD and CEO of the India business of 3M, and you got recently promoted, and you started heading the global adhesives business, which is a business which is a little less than $2 billion, right? It's a large business. It's a big role. Now, you've been a leader for a while, and you're also leading a bigger business in these uncertain times. Tell us, how has leadership changed in these times, and what are your golden rules for leadership?
Thank you, Dr. Batra. First of all, I just want to make a small little correction. I head the global abrasives business
Yeah,
I know
said
abrasives and
adhesives.
adhesives kind of
Yes,
kind of
said
sound
adhesives.
similar.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's right.
it so happens
Thank
that
you for correcting me.
it so happens that a good friend of mine, Veena Lakundi, another woman of Indian origins, leads the adhesives business. So I wouldn't be fair if I lay claim to that. But just to kind of bring back ourselves to your question, most leaders have gotten to where they are because they have multiple muscles. We have been living in a world that's been changing much faster in the past couple of decades versus any time in human history. I've been working close to 30 years. I was only 5 years old when I started working, as you can imagine. But this more connected world, a faster changing world, we have tested some of those muscles. People in my age group for sure know and remember what I call our crisis muscles. I would say, though, my last 3 years in India really trained me well to bring those crisis muscles into work. May not have been at the scale that we're seeing with this Black Swan event right now, but all of us went through, many of us went through demonetization. Many of us went through GST. We have had some practice rounds, right? Now, this is the biggie. This is the big one that we have seen. I've been through oil and gas crisis. I was the global business leader for 3M for oil and gas in 2014, 15, 16, when oil and gas kind of imploded. So I think we need to just remember collectively that we have these muscles. We have to bring them to the fore, and we've got to practice them with intentionality. And we've got to recognize that this is an opportunity for us to try these muscles out again and make them better. So from where I sit, I realize that I've been talking to my team members the last 2 to 3 weeks. And we have weekly meetings where we have a lot of reflections. And we share our reflections across about 150 leaders globally in my organization. I would say about 4 or 5 principles that I try to keep in front of me. And I think the first one is to really pause and not to get into this fight or flight response, but really pause and reflect. Put the brakes on your own brain. COVID-19 has put a pause in our breathless lives in some ways, but it's also brought to the fore the value of reflection. During crises, we need to remember to reflect, pause a little, watch your breath. It's like yoga, breathe in, breathe out, observe yourself, go at a higher level and observe yourself, your environment, your team, your business, as though you're not a part of it. That allows your brain to absorb, to design, and to address with calm the anxiety that's associated with it, right? The brain can only do that when you're not in the moment. We all know the value of sleep. It allows your brain to regenerate. Even while you're awake, you can set aside 5-minute breaks every couple hours. And you say, I'm just going to pause and I'm going to reflect. I can tell you each of these times when I've been through big crises, I have felt the power of that reflection and, pausing and reflecting. So I'm bringing that into practice. I'm preaching that even more because, it's this incredible time when a lot of folks, billions of people around the world are getting to practice our crisis muscles. The second one, I think this is really, really important for us to recognize. When times go bad, go south very quickly, there's a tendency, often in kind of more hierarchical societies, there's a tendency to pull up decision-making and control it in a very small coterie of people. Leaders can tend to become autocrats in times like this. The absolute opposite needs to be done. We need to democratize decision-making, involve more people, empower, enable the whole team, right? So the uncertainty that's generated by crisis should not lead to an urge to limit authority, bring it back to the team, instead involve many more stakeholders. I remember when I first moved to India, I would go into our plants, we had 4 plants around the country. I'd go into the plants and I'd talk to my operators, incredibly smart people, and tell them that, I'm not as smart as you think I am. And there would be this complete silence, like, what do you mean? No managing director has come and told them that. And I would say, none of us are as smart as all of us are together. And it's this ability
Beautiful.
to democratize. Yes, Dr. Batra.
I said beautiful. None of us are as smart as all of us are together.
I'm a huge believer in that. I mean, I wish I were that smart, but I'm not. And none of us are. So we need to have this humility of making sure that as you enable and empower people in your organization, now you're putting into action hundreds, thousands of actual general managers. for that part of the organization, they are far more knowledgeable than you. So if you can share the problem definition and you can democratize the decision making, you're going to just enable this organization, your organization, to do incredible things, even in the midst of crazy crises, right? The other piece that I always try to remind myself, and I have been talking with my leadership team, with my operating committee very actively, is small choices. In India, we would call it jugaad. In US, we call it hustle. But there are small choices that you can make every day that'll exponentially impact the outcome, not just in the moment, not just in the crisis, but in future. So in India, we have this automatic recognition of the value of jugaad, not the negative side of jugaad, but the positive side of looking for how we can make changes, how we can go by, how we can cover the obstacles. We call it hustle in the US, as jugaad in India. It's important. Big decisions are obvious. Should I be putting in a big capex and health equipment, as 3M company obviously is looking at significant new investments. Those are big bets. Those are big decisions. You have a laid out process for that. But it's these small everyday decisions that you can make that dramatically impact when aggregated together. So that hustle, that jugaad is really important. The other piece that I'm a big believer in, and there are many, many negative mentoring examples out here, do not delegate communication. At times of crisis, people do look up to the leader. And we know we need to look calm, but not just look calm, but be calm. It goes back to that reflection piece, which is so important. Don't delegate communication, but cascade it. Empower people to communicate your message at their color, but broaden it, increase the impact. One of the biggest issues, and I think some of us may remember this, BP's response to the 2010 Deepwater Horizon explosion. I was in oil and gas. This is an example that's pretty close to my heart. The CEO was fired after 5 months. I don't know if people remember that. But the biggest issue at that time was for 3 days, the CEO was missing in action. And also thereafter, when he emerged, he claimed it wasn't their oil spill. Communication is incredibly important to your employees, to your team members, to your stakeholders, your investors, to obviously your customers, your channel partners. Do not delegate communication. I'll probably repeat myself 5 times. And the other piece that needs to happen throughout your work life, and hopefully you had a chance to do this before the event, is surround yourself with leaders who have integrity and character. People who are hustling to get themselves up the ladder are typically not very good crisis leaders. So it's not easily done overnight, but make sure that your team, your operating committee, your leadership team, they are people of ethics, integrity, and character, because a lot of that will be needed now. So hopefully that gives a view of what's top of mind for me, what I consider to be my crisis muscles, and really putting them into play now makes them better over time.
Sure, fantastic. On this optimistic note, both your notes have been very optimistic that there is life beyond pandemic, there's life beyond COVID, hopefully better. And this is not the new normal, this is the new abnormal, and we'll hopefully return to the normal at some point in the near future. Tell us, from the pandemic, you shared on a personal side that people are adapting, whether it's the colleagues, people you work with. But tell us, what are the opportunities for leaders, for companies, for customers on the other side of the pandemic? What is the silver lining in the cloud?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think searching for the silver lining in the cloud may be and a misnomer in itself. I think when we think deep and we reflect upon it, we know new will emerge. I think it's important for us to not look for a certain definition of success, but to stay connected with what's changing, to look for opportunities coming out of that so we can participate and build it into success. Just to give you an example, a lot of consumer examples are being talked about, so I feel people will be able to connect with that. As things are changing, if as Uber, I'm looking for success in more commuter customer volume, that's not going to come probably for quite some time. But if I am able to shift my model and lean more into food delivery, Well, that is success in the here and now. So I think depending on the industry, it'll look very different. And clearly in the 1918, 1920 zone, if I were a horse buggy maker, a wheel maker for horse buggy, I would have been searching for that silver lining, and it was not going to come. But if I had taken my manufacturing technology and said, I make these big, gigantic wheels, well, I could be making small wheels for the Ford Model T. That's that pivot, that's the shift, that's looking at deeply understanding what my core competencies are and how in the new world, because every day there is a new world. Things are changing faster than ever before. In that new world, how can my core competencies, how can my go-to-market model, how can my human capital be put into play, right? So I look not for silver lining, but I look for opportunities, because they kind of get you to the same place, but they're two different mindsets. Look for opportunities that your core business capabilities are suited to serve. We are expecting some deep changes in consumer behavior and buyer behavior, really understanding how we can be leaders in that shift, leaning into the wave, leaning into the curve, rather than resisting or being dragged into it. That's really important. So, I mean, without going into too many details into my business world, because a lot of it is obviously of tremendous competitive value, I would just, leave that thought in people's mind, is look for the change that leads to different consumption patterns, different shifts in terms of how people look to engage, how people look to give you access, how people choose to consume, and that's going to look very different. And your organization, a deep understanding of what you're good at, will make you more able. I'll go back just a little bit to what I said earlier. That game of hustle, that game of jugaad, is so you can do much more experimentation. So you can try little bets and see what works. That will help you design the silver lining. You'll be the author, not the clouds, not the sun, but you will be the author of that silver line, because you'll move it towards that. Hope that helps, Dr. Batra.
I hope. When I'm talking to you, I'm getting ideas for my business based on what you're saying. What you're saying makes sense. It's, but you because you're saying it, it's getting me to focus on it. One of the things you alluded to was changes in consumer behavior. Before we go there,
yeah,
what do you see as the future of workplace? What will change in the way of course, we will do more virtual meetings, we'll do more video conference calls, we'll travel less. But beyond that, how will the workplace change forever?
Yeah, workplace, I don't know, I'm going to date myself generationally, but I still remember initially in my early days out of business school, I was working for a gentleman who used to insist that all the sales reps, I was a branch manager in Kolkata, in a liquor go down and branch. So just, wonder of wonders. I don't know if I told you, Dr. Batra,
looking at what's happening in India, is it an advantage or disadvantage? People are queuing up to get liquor. I mean, it surprises me. I mean, liquor, people have been falling over each other. I don't know. It worries me. And there's been lots of jokes on social media, how the government is dependent on liquor for revenues,
Yes, and taxes.
But I understand for young women to be in a liquor go down with the kind of, I understand the context.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was the first woman that UB Group back then hired in sales and marketing. So that was a lot of fun. But having said that, I started my work life with a gentleman who insisted that all the sales reps come in and hang their scooter keys on a wall, right? So that was the amount of monitoring that people would consider normal at that point in time. You are in the office and you're working. If you're not in the office, you're not working. That was very much, 30 years ago. 12 years ago, our company, 3M, introduced what's called flexibility. And I was one of the authors of that for the whole company. Generationally, the pull from, employees, young parents, single mothers like me, those in the sandwich generation who are looking after their parents, looking after their children, and many others were very excited to see that come into play. Today, it's a given. How many companies really insist on their people being in the office to work? We have 24-hour work life, right? So you work when you can, you work when you want to, whenever and wherever you are. but you're delivering what needs to be delivered. So that model, we call it flexibility, is going to come into play even more. Employees' health issues will need to be taken into consideration. We have people who are in higher risk group who we'd be completely comfortable not having them come into the office, maybe for 4 months, maybe for 6 months. This flexible approach will be very much the new normal. And it has been kind of selectively the normal in current times, but it'll become much more the norm than not. Another area that I think would be really interestingly evolving is travel for meetings. I'm kind of used to having corner office meetings. My team will get me in, I'll talk to the corner office equivalent of me, and I'll meet in person, and we have a team-to-team meeting. We get a lot done in those meetings. We have evolved those into having pre-meetings by video calls, and then maybe down the road, meet in person. So we'll see a lot more efficiency versus these expensive in-person top-to-top meetings. Humans still will interact with humans in a certain way that helps us connect, that helps us understand what makes the other person tick. We have never been rational decision makers, so it's important for us to understand the characteristics, because that helps you understand the irrationality of decision making sometimes. The other piece that I see clearly being impacted is capacity planning. So over the last 30 years, we've seen our workplaces change from neatly defined offices with doors on them and maybe some work area to a lot more open space, to a lot more interaction space, lots of cubicles, a lot less offices. But that capacity planning of how many people will put in a square foot area may change. Obviously, it'll
in terms of distancing, people
correct.
getting a little far off from each other.
Correct. And then we would probably see this this intersection between flexibility and workspace planning. We don't know how that'll actually emerge, but definitely in our company, we're having some of those conversations and thinking through what will that work, what will a workplace qualify as, and what will that look like, and what would be those parameters we'll draw around how we would entertain and work with people in the offices versus wherever they are. Really believe that, especially our younger employees will embrace this pretty quickly. We're already seeing that, but there's some, other side of the coin is they can't be working from home all the time when you have a 3-year-old. I have a 23-year-old, so my problem is different. So I think those are some of the dimensions that we're thinking through quite a bit to see how we may change what is considered to be a workplace even.
Fantastic. I think you give very specific inputs on what could change. Now, yeah. Debarati, what is your leadership style? If you had to sum up your leadership style in a very authentic way, what would that be?
Yeah, we're all work in progress, right? We're all evolving. So your leadership style, what it was when you were in your 20s is very different versus 30s and thereafter, but your core DNA probably remains the same. So, when I look at how I lead and what has helped me, it's obviously kind of a distillate of over the years what I've built towards. I'm very, very passionate about what I consider to be the 3 winning traits. They work for me really well. They worked supposedly for my team members because I have received good feedback. I believe in what I call the 3 H's of leadership. It's hunger, it's humility, and heart. Those
Beautiful.
3 are an
hunger, humility, and heart.
Yes.
Beautiful.
My 3 H's. Hunger is obvious. It keeps you searching for that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It keeps you searching for more. A certain amount of anxiety with not being happy with the status quo. That's hunger. And I can tell you for your viewers, I feel blessed that I was born in India. We are born hungry. We are born trying to change things. We have this incredible collective desire to improve. We're not happy with the status quo, and that's great. That's how I feel, that I was born hungry, and I think my Indian background, my Indian culture, my being raised in India for 30-something years really helped me stay perennially in that state of hunger and not get very upset about it. I'm really, really happy that I have that in me. And you recognize that trait in a lot of very successful leaders, that they are trying to change, they're trying to improve, they're trying to push the finish line, change the competitive set. That's hunger. Hunger is pretty obvious.
So what you achieve, then you seek a new goal.
Exactly. You keep pushing the finish line. You should be unhappy with what
and
you have
you
achieved.
stay true to your purpose, because
Right.
that's a milestone in achieving that purpose.
Absolutely. And the purpose is not a ladder. Since you use the word purpose, purpose has nothing to do with ladders and steps. Purpose is this large, sometimes amorphous, but sometimes defined entity that you're trying to seek. It better be bold, audacious, and big. It doesn't have steps in the ladder. A lot of people confuse purpose with steps in the ladder. I remember when I became the vice president in my current role, one of my team members from 16 years ago said, "So how does it feel that you have achieved your goal?" And I said, "This was never my goal. My goal is to create impact and positively impact people's lives personally and professionally. I have not reached my goal. I have so much more to do till my last breath. Hopefully I can positively impact." I don't want to sound grandiose. This is very real. This is very down to earth. I want to continue to impact people, their lives, professionally and personally. So my goal wasn't to become a vice president. I'm very happy that the company has recognized and gotten me where it has, so I can have even bigger impact. But so that's the important differentiation and delineation in my mind. Humility, my second one. This is all about having a student mindset. I think, Dr. Batra, you and I have talked about this quite a bit. Having that student mindset. We are not God's gift to mankind, candidly, or womankind. We are works in progress. We have so much more to learn. None of us are as intelligent as all of us are put together. That humility, that core student mindset, it helps you continually learn. I also hire for humility. If anybody comes in and with a big ego and tries to sell me how much they've accomplished, they typically are dead on arrival in my interview process. I'm looking for people who have the humility to say, here's what I have learned, not here's what I've accomplished, and here's so much more I would like to learn, and I think you're the right place where I can learn. That learning mindset is incredibly important. It actually makes you far, far smarter over time than if you were trying to do it yourself. Most recently, this humility piece is used in, as we teach people the growth mindset versus fixed mindset toolkit. So it's a very, very helpful mindset. And the third one is heart. I mean, people want to work with leaders who are human. People don't want to work with leaders who are seen as androidal, seen as robotic, seen as, machine-like. They're not human. And human means you have flaws. Human means you empathize. Human means you connect with people. A gentleman that I learned a lot from, never met him in my life, but I emulated and learned a lot from is a gentleman called Paul O'Neill. He was a Treasury Secretary for George W. Bush, and he was also the CEO of Alcoa. Yeah. He popularized, Dr. Batra, you would remember this term called discretionary energy. And discretionary energy is all about enabling your people, your team, your organizations to bring 50% of that energy that they're actually holding back. Compliance level of energy is 100%. You pay them, you're paying an employee, the employee is bringing what they think you're paying them for. Goals, performance measurement, etc. Discretionary energy is when you can link your people to this bold, audacious purpose. When they see high integrity in leaders, they turn on and they give you what they have been holding back. And it's considered to be almost 50% more. So you're paying them 100 rupees, you're now getting 150 rupees per second, per hour, whatever that be. So it's really important when you connect with your people, when you empathize with your people, this combination of hunger, humility, and heart has not just served me well. When I share this with my team, and I'm very open about it, talking to my team, it connects with them. And they need to recognize that I can't just be talking about it. You have to live it every day. And you've got to take feedback to say, hey, am I doing this or am I not living what I'm preaching, right? So that again goes back to humility, that feedback loop. So maybe a long answer, Dr. Batra, but I think I'll kind of go back to my 3 H's.
I know you a little bit and I have conversations, but even if they're less, I know what you are saying, you live it, and I get that energy from you. And you're rightly saying that discretionary energy is about getting their heart into it more than their mind.
Yes.
getting them to enjoy what they do, getting them to feel important, feel like co-creators rather than just
Absolutely.
being told what to do. So I've seen what you're saying. You live it. And I want to bring about this question. You worked in Bangalore, now you're in Minnesota. You're really a global citizen. You work for a global company. Tell us culturally, how is India at an advantage in these times? Or is it a fair question to ask? Is India at an advantage culturally? And where it is positioned to lead? Because empathy, compassion is part of our Vedas. You know, the world is our family, is part of our ethos. We are, Atiti Devo Bhav, guest is a god. Those are part of who we are. So how do you think India is positioned to transition and transform and reimagine itself post-COVID?
Yeah, I was very open in sharing that my 3 years back in India, I obviously grew up in India, lived here, I lived there until I was 34, and then I moved to the US and I went back for 3 years to lead the 3M India operations. I've always shared that, it was the best time of my life, the last 3 years that I got to spend in India. The pace of India and the heart of India come together, and kind of this fantastic combination of energy. I mentioned the hunger piece of it. I feel we are born with that. We're born with wanting to change and evolve and improve. I just stop for a quick second and go back to what I started with, the reflection, right? So I often remind myself that I come from the land of yoga, right? As you mentioned, reflection, recognition of who you are in this universe.
Going inside.
Absolutely, going inside. So if you look at the sustainable leadership traits, bring them back to my hunger, humility, heart for connection here. That's what we have grown up with. That's our deep culture. We may not live it every day, but these are the times when you pause, you reflect, and you bring those to the surface, and you see how you can leverage them. I think if there's one part that I would talk about that I think India can do more of, is to connect this hunger. We have the purpose, but connect this hunger through humility. So, as leadership, we were also born in a somewhat hierarchical society, right? I was born in a somewhat hierarchical society. We have to actively push that hierarchical element of our culture away and use bring up the humility to the fore, because that will transform our organizations, our country, our states, our villages into more self-empowerment and transformation that they can drive. So I really think there's a lot of conversations going on right now as manufacturing shifts from China. Will it come to India? We know we don't necessarily always win when it comes to logistics, just the realities of covering a country with our infrastructure that we have. India has always led with thought. And the IT revolution that we started in India showed the world how things could be done. Now, of course, we got a little, we had to retransform ourselves a few times, but we have to lead with thought. If we bring ourselves back to that we are thought leaders in the world, not look for silver linings, but look for new opportunities, ways to reinvent India, ways to reinvent what we stand for, ways to reinvent with humility where the world needs to go in future. We can lead the way in thought. I think that's our greatest advantage. We have that hunger deeply set in us. How do we then bring about our humility, and then how do we drive towards new thought leadership for the new world?
Thank you, Debarati. And you're calling me Dr. Batra, but like we normally talk, you call me Annurag.
I call you Annurag.
I start worrying who she's talking to, but it's okay. But what do I have a PhD? You know that, Debarati.
Yes, that's why.
Yeah, I have a PhD, permanent head damage in emailing. People ask me, what did I get a PhD in? I tell my kids I got it because I do better emails than other people. So, they have a good laugh. But coming back to you, I want to ask you my two last questions, and I'll save one for the last. And then there are very important and leaders who joined, very good quality. So I will take their question and the audience question. So that's really interactive. My first question is, there are a lot of young women leaders who logged in. I can see. So as a women leader, it is a little tougher. I know it. Having said that, I don't think in India there are less examples of women kind of breaking the glass ceiling, not ever believing in the glass ceiling and continuing to lead. If you had to give an advice to young women who are in their early 30s or 25 or whatever, who are in corporate jobs and are looking to grow, what would that advice be?
Yeah, that's a really good question. My experience first, before any advice, my experience first is that in India, professionally for women, the battles at home are bigger than the battles in the workplace. And I'm not necessarily, I don't know everybody's situations, but typically I've had to fight, and I've seen my colleagues and friends have to fight more battles at home for respect from the family, for support from the spouse, for help with children.
For tolerating your success, accepting your success,
Right. And I think if you are focused on how you're going to deal with the battle at home and have a specific strategy on how you're going to co-opt more helpers, that may be an uncle-in-law, that may be an aunt-in-law, that may be a young cousin, but try and build a support system for your home life. When you are able to do that, the work life is easy. Candidly, most companies, and I've obviously had an opportunity to work with a lot of companies, are really looking for women leaders. They are looking to support and provide the tailwind needed. And there are a lot of current CEOs, women CEOs in companies that I had the opportunity to get to talk to, in all deep humility, have an opportunity to mentor them a little bit. They didn't need much mentoring, but I had opportunities to talk to them. And it was often what was going on at home and the infrastructure needed to help them succeed. So have a strategy, work on that, co-opt people, build a bigger support network intentionally for home. The work part is all about what you're delivering. Are you bringing the greatest hunger every day? Are you becoming that positive, your sense of positive bias? Are you looking for not silver lining, but opportunities every day? Are you recognizing the work of others? There's no place for victim mindset. And I think most female leaders, most women leaders at work don't get up in the morning and bring a victim mindset. Sometimes it becomes, the events lead there. But my view of the world is the work is easy. Maybe that's how I think. The home was not, the home is not. So have a specific, distinct strategy for that. I'm a single mother. So of course, for me, my strategies had to be, 2X as bulletproof. And I really co-opted a team of other mothers who helped me. I was traveling 2 weeks in a month. Sometimes I'd be in Germany and my son is throwing up in the school. Somebody has to go pick him up, bring him back. The sitter has to be found. So, it's not going to be easy, but with a clear strategy, just as our, business world is not easy, winning against competition is not easy, have a proper strategy, have a laid out thought process on how you're going to build a support network. That would be my biggest advice.
And
I don't think, sorry, go ahead.
No.
I don't think the headwinds in the companies in today's world are meaningful. I think those are more tailwinds than headwinds.
Beautiful. Thank you for making it so authentic. I want to ask you, how do you compete with yourself? How do you better yourself? Because at the end of the day, when you have doubt, all of us have challenges, we have doubts, we have situations that we have no control over. Sometimes we make mistakes. So how do you talk to yourself? What do you tell yourself when you're in tough situations? And give us an example of how you got out of a tough situation. Because I think that's what defines a leader.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I believe that I've been, I wouldn't say getting out of tough situations, but addressing tough situations, primarily with transparency and with humility. So I'm very transparent about a problem definition, and I'm very open about the fact that I don't have all the answers. I may have a thought process, I may have a certain vector that I prefer over others, but I'm very open about that, and I co-opt my leadership team. I do not believe, when you're not in a competition to prove to everybody that you're the smartest one in the room, life actually becomes pretty easy. My operating committee, my team sees my authenticity, sees my transparency, and they want me to win. When I win, they win. So they are there to help. Last evening from 6 to 7 o'clock, I was talking to one of my team members for a specific issue where I don't know what the solution is. And I was saying, I need your help. Think through this, talk to others, come back to me. And those situations are faced almost every day. You know, I have the opportunity to lead an almost $1.5 billion business. The problems are in that scale, right? I remember I would go to my mother when I first became the managing director in India, and I would say, you know, I define my job as not how big 3M India is, but how many people's lives I'm impacting. So if, you know, my mother would say, but Barack Obama's job is much bigger than yours. So she made sure I stayed humble all the time. My whole approach is I'm not the smartest one in the room. I'm always going and asking for feedback. I'm always asking for help. And I get boatloads of it. You know, there is a lot of successful people suffer from what's called the imposter's dilemma. In our own minds, we are hard on ourselves, and we think we didn't deserve, and that there was some accident of good fortune shining on us that we've gotten to where we have. I don't have that much of a feeling of, you know, the imposter's dilemma because I don't think I've gotten anywhere. I think I'm just a part of my journey, and I've got a lot more to do, and I haven't figured it out, and I'm not as smart as, you know, people think I may be. That just keeps me very connected and doesn't make me get into a mindset of fear. It gets me into a mindset of haven't found a solution yet, who can help? So, you know, I'm speaking very colloquially because it's just how I look at problems. I also have a 23-year-old who I used to affectionately call my mother-in-law. I often, even last night, there's a presentation that I'm making next week. There's some elements that I wanted to test out with him because he's got a very good, at 23 now, he's got a very good brain in consumer behavior, especially for younger people. And I got some really good ideas. So you can test your ideas, you can test your thought process, not just at work, not just with your colleagues at work, but also at home. You know, bounce your thoughts off. So I think that just reduces that stress and the pressure. It helps you actually seek more, and that gets you to the solution. Hope that clarified.
Thank you. And Debarati, if I may say, I've only known you less than 3 years, but you know, I feel like I've known you for 15 years. And one thing I have to say, even on a call, it is a very affectionate, warm, very real conversation.